Amelia Sinclair never intended to fall in love at the Future Design Tech and Architecture Summit in San Francisco. She wasn't even supposed to attend. Her original plan was to spend the weekend in Oregon with her father, helping him repaint the old garden shed behind the shop he used to run before his hands started trembling. But fate had other intentions. She was a last-minute stand-in for her firm's senior partner and wore an ill-fitting navy blazer borrowed from a colleague. The hall buzzed with a blend of tech developers, architects, and corporate leaders, most too concerned with showcasing their prototypes than noticing the soft-spoken designer sketching a moss wall concept in the corner. That's when Travis Brennan spotted her. His keynote speech had just wrapped, an electrifying, ego-laced monologue about innovation and emotional branding, and he was soaking in admiration when his eyes locked on hers. Amelia, unaware, had her head down, her pen racing across her pad. She wasn't impressed by showboating. That intrigued him. Travis introduced himself with the kind of confidence that bordered on arrogance, a practiced charm wrapped in polished smiles and a tailored suit. She found him annoying, but undeniably magnetic. Their first conversation happened over watered-down coffee during a session break, and while it started with surface-level banter about design theory and digital engagement, it took a surprising turn. Amelia, guarded but curious, mentioned her dream to merge botanical architecture with urban living. Travis, ever the opportunist, tilted his head and smiled. "You're not just building spaces, you're planting emotions," he said smoothly. It was the kind of line that would have made her roll her eyes under normal circumstances, but there was something in the way he said it, like he actually meant it. Over the next 2 days, they kept running into each other, in the buffet line, at the evening mixer, at an impromptu breakout session where they debated the future of sustainable materials. Amelia noticed that he listened more than he spoke when it was just the two of them. He asked about her sketches. He complimented her ideas without hijacking them. He even asked about her late mother, after Amelia let it slip during a story about her hometown. He didn't pry, but he remembered. That caught her off guard. By the end of the summit, something fragile but sincere had begun to bloom between them. Amelia was skeptical, it all felt too easy, too fast. But then again, Travis didn't press her. He simply offered his number and said, "I'd like to keep this conversation going, even when the panels end." They started talking regularly after that, calls, long texts, late-night video chats. Amelia, who had spent most of her 20s bracing herself against betrayal and isolation, found herself softening. Travis had layers. He spoke of being misunderstood, of chasing approval from a cold father who never said, "I'm proud of you," of a childhood where his mother overcompensated with affection that sometimes suffocated him. She listened. She didn't try to fix him. And maybe that's why he kept coming back. Over time, the calls became visits, and visits became weekends spent in each other's cities. He sent her books on marketing and business strategy, she mailed him pressed flowers from gardens she visited. It was delicate and deliberate. And as spring turned to summer, it felt less like a spark and more like a slow-burning flame neither of them wanted to extinguish. It felt real, or at least, it seemed to. The wedding was held at the historic Larkspur Estate in Seattle, a glass-walled haven surrounded by redwoods and bathed in soft golden light. Amelia had designed the floral layout herself, each detail whispered elegance, from the ivory wisteria draped over the altar to the glass terrariums glowing with firefly lights that lined the aisle. Guests murmured about how breathtaking everything looked, how the bride glowed in her minimalist gown with off-shoulder silk and delicate vine embroidery. But beneath Amelia's calm smile was 1,000 whispers of doubt, none loud enough to stop her heart from racing as she walked toward Travis. Her father, Nathan, gave her away with a firm squeeze and whispered, "If she ever comes back to life to see this day, your mother would say, 'You built your own garden, sweetheart.'" Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes, but she smiled through them. Travis stood confidently in a charcoal tuxedo, smirking slightly like he knew the cameras were already catching his best angles. Yet when he looked at Amelia, there was a flicker, just a flicker, of something softer. She didn't know it at the time, but it wasn't love. It was possession. He believed she was a prize he had won. The vows were carefully written, each word a thread pulling them into what was supposed to be forever. Amelia spoke from the heart, about growing up father-anchored and mother-hungry, about finding peace in sketchbooks and purpose in planting beauty into empty spaces, and about how Travis reminded her to dream louder. Her voice trembled only once, when she promised to choose love even on days when it felt hard. Travis, in turn, delivered a speech-like vow that drew chuckles and sighs. He compared her to his muse, his miracle, and his missing link. It was theatrical, perfectly delivered, and emotionally stirring to anyone who didn't know better. Amelia smiled through it, even as a strange coldness gripped her. He kissed her before the officiant could say "you may," and the crowd laughed. The reception was even grander, crystal chandeliers, violin quartets, and speeches that painted Travis as a golden boy rising through the ranks of influence. But in all the sparkle, only Nathan noticed the shadows in his daughter's eyes. Isabel, seated beside him, leaned over and said softly, "She looks like she's holding her breath." Later that evening, after the cake had been cut and the sparklers had dimmed, Amelia stood barefoot on the balcony of the bridal suite. The city twinkled beneath her like a dream she hadn't asked for. Inside, Travis was still laughing with his friends over champagne, his voice echoing through the hall like a victorious anthem. Amelia looked down at her hands, the same ones that had drafted blueprints, planted tulips, brushed her father's hair after his surgery. These were hands that built things. And yet, today, she'd built a life she couldn't name. She didn't regret the marriage, not yet. She believed in love. She believed in people. And she still believed, naively, that Travis had depths she hadn't yet reached. What she didn't know was that Travis didn't see depth the way she did. To him, people were chapters he wrote and discarded, characters in his self-published novel of success. He didn't marry Amelia because he saw her as his equal. He married her because the world did. Because she made him look evolved. That night, as Amelia closed the curtain and turned away from the view, she told herself that love was a choice they'd make again and again. What she didn't realize was that one of them had stopped choosing it long before the vows were even written. Amelia had always found healing in soil. Before blueprints, before sketches, before she learned to scale walls on software or decorate them with curated light, there was her mother's garden. After the honeymoon, Travis dived straight into back-to-back speaking engagements and corporate dinners, while Amelia asked for quiet. She didn't want the limelight or the photo ops, she wanted roots. Using a small inheritance her mother had left in a locked garden trust, she purchased a neglected plot on the city's edge, a triangular patch of land that used to be a parking lot, now covered in weeds and the whispers of what it once was. There, Amelia began to build a studio. Not an office. Not a showroom. But a studio made of glass and wood, with open-air corridors, climbing ivy, and a greenhouse that doubled as a sketching loft. She called it Whispering Earth. It was her quiet rebellion against the noise of Travis's world. Every day, while Travis traveled and courted attention, Amelia slipped into boots and gloves, planting her hands in the dirt and watching something beautiful grow from scratch. The studio would serve as her sacred space, a home for clients who believed in storytelling through nature, and a sanctuary from a marriage that was slowly becoming all sparkle and no soil. It was during one of those long workdays, knees muddy, hair in a scarf, that Isabel Monroe showed up, carrying a brown paper bag and her usual smirk. "You really do like making beauty where nobody's watching," she teased. Isabel had been Amelia's best friend since college, ever since they'd both fought over the last spot in a public speaking class and ended up becoming roommates. She was the opposite of Amelia in every way, loud, cynical, fiercely loyal, and fiercely heartbroken after her ex-husband left her for a younger coworker with a podcast on spiritual intimacy. The betrayal had left Isabel raw but wiser. She and Amelia sat in the shade, eating sandwiches while the wind rustled through the garden bed. "Does he ever ask you what you're building?" Isabel asked softly, her tone more observation than accusation. Amelia paused. "He asks about the profits," she replied, avoiding eye contact. "He thinks I should brand the studio as a luxury eco-retreat or pitch it to influencers. But this isn't for Instagram." Isabel nodded. "And does he know that?" Amelia didn't respond. A butterfly danced past them and landed on Amelia's shoulder, and she smiled bitterly. "He thinks the garden is cute," she added after a long pause. "Like a hobby. Like I'm playing house." Later that week, Amelia returned to the garden alone and found herself sitting in the greenhouse, sketching in silence as dusk painted shadows on the glass. She stared at a line she couldn't get right. Her pencil had paused on the figure of a woman reaching toward the sky, arms outstretched, but the expression wouldn't come. Frustrated, she flipped the page, and as the pencil touched paper again, she began drawing a new outline, an arched trellis, strong yet elegant, framing a walkway of moss and forget-me-nots. It reminded her of her mother, Evelyn. Evelyn had died when Amelia was just 10, breast cancer took her slow and painful, and Amelia remembered the hospital smells more than the funeral hymns. Her mother's last gift had been a pressed flower journal that Amelia still kept tucked inside her studio bag. That night, she reopened the journal and ran her fingers over the dry petals. They crumbled slightly, delicate with time. In that moment, she whispered, "I don't know if I chose the right life, Mom." Outside, the wind blew softly, bending the trees as if they too were uncertain. The garden she built wasn't just a business. It was her anchor. Her memory vault. Her quiet scream into a world that had begun demanding she smile, submit, and sparkle. And though she hadn't realized it yet, the garden would become more than her refuge. It would become her weapon. Travis Brennan's world was made of mirrors and microphones. While Amelia nurtured life from the soil, Travis was constructing a different kind of empire, one paved with sound bites, TEDx talks, and social media clips sliced into digestible motivational quotes. By year 2 of their marriage, he had become the face of UrbanSpire, a rising PR tech firm that packaged brands for overnight relevance. He marketed himself as a growth strategist with a human touch, but in reality, everything he sold was rehearsed. His social accounts exploded with carefully filtered images, him shaking hands with tech founders, sipping espresso with thought leaders, walking confidently into conferences with captions like, "Power isn't loud. It's intentional." To outsiders, Travis was the modern-day success story, ambitious, polished, deeply articulate. But those close to him, particularly Amelia, began to notice something deeper than arrogance brewing beneath his curated persona. There was a hunger in him that never seemed satisfied, an emptiness he masked with applause. He didn't just want success, he wanted to be worshipped. Amelia accompanied him to one of his leadership retreats in Aspen, hosted by UrbanSpire for their top clients and influencers. She had initially declined, wanting to stay back to meet with a new landscape client, but Travis insisted, citing it as a good couple branding opportunity. The resort was opulent, all glass and snow and egos wrapped in designer snow gear. Amelia wore a simple cream turtleneck and snow boots she'd owned for years. She didn't fit in, and Travis didn't bother hiding it. "Next time, bring something more flattering. This crowd notices everything," he whispered before they stepped into the lodge. Inside, Amelia found herself surrounded by shallow conversations and deeper schemes. Travis flourished. He knew everyone, or pretended to. He kissed cheeks, made champagne toasts, and introduced Amelia as his brilliant, earthy half who keeps me grounded. It sounded sweet, but to Amelia, it felt like a polite insult. During one of the breakout panels, Amelia stepped outside for air and overheard 2 women giggling over Travis. One referred to him as the keynote daddy, the other replied, "I bet his wife is just a placeholder." Amelia didn't flinch, but something inside her recoiled. When she rejoined the group, Travis was already deep in conversation with a statuesque woman with icy blue nails and a voice like melted sugar. Her name was Sasha Whitmore. Sasha had the kind of presence that demanded attention without asking for it. She wore fur-lined boots and a cropped sweater that clung to her body like confidence itself. Her smile was wide and perfectly timed, especially when she placed a manicured hand on Travis's chest mid-laugh. Amelia approached silently, observing as Sasha leaned in, speaking close enough that Travis didn't immediately notice Amelia standing behind him. "Oh," Sasha said when she finally did, "you must be the wife." It was a sentence dressed as a compliment, yet soaked in venom. "And you must be the influencer who mistakes proximity for power," Amelia replied, offering a gracious smile. Travis chuckled nervously, brushing it off, but the tension clung to the air like fog. Over the next few hours, Amelia watched how Sasha lingered near Travis, how he didn't resist. Something shifted in Amelia, not just suspicion, but intuition. She'd always trusted what people did more than what they said. And Sasha, with all her faux kindness and polished flattery, was marking territory. That night in their hotel suite, Travis claimed Sasha was just a strategic connection who could amplify his brand among Gen Z consumers. Amelia nodded, said nothing, and turned away. She didn't believe him, not really. But she wasn't ready to confront it either. Not yet. She had learned long ago that timing was everything. And sometimes, silence was the strongest seed you could plant. It was supposed to be a casual afternoon. Amelia had carved out a sliver of time between client consultations and greenhouse expansion plans to meet Isabel at Velvet and Vine, a boutique nestled in the heart of downtown Seattle. Isabel had impulsively RSVP'd to a black-tie gala for her publishing firm and was in desperate need of a dress. Amelia offered to tag along, mostly for moral support but also for the joy of being in a space where art lived in fabric. The boutique was draped in soft blush tones and gold trim, with velvet mannequins posing in silk and chiffon. Amelia, dressed in a loose linen dress and ankle boots smudged with dried soil, felt a little out of place but comforted by Isabel's presence. They laughed, debated necklines, and swapped stories about past fashion disasters. Isabel tried on a backless emerald gown that made her look like a tempest, and Amelia took photos between giggles. Then, without warning, the boutique's main door chimed, and the air shifted. Sasha Whitmore walked in like she owned the place. Hair perfectly waved, body draped in a designer tan trench coat, sunglasses pushed just above her brow. She didn't notice Amelia or Isabel at first. Her attention was locked on her phone as she exchanged fake laughter with someone on the other end of the call. "No, babe, tell Travis I said he better wear navy to match my dress or I'll post that clip from Aspen," she said, loud enough for the entire boutique to hear. Amelia froze. Isabel went rigid. Sasha's eyes finally landed on them, and the way her expression shifted was cinematic. She ended the call with a casual, "Gotta go, darling," and offered a sweet, practiced smile. "Oh wow, small world," she purred, eyes gleaming. "Amelia, right? The garden designer? You're even lovelier up close." Her words were drenched in politeness, but Amelia saw the challenge hiding behind her lashes. Sasha browsed the racks like nothing happened, her every move calculated, and eventually pulled a sapphire blue gown identical to the one Travis had complimented on a celebrity a week ago. "I'm thinking of wearing this to an event Travis invited me to," she said, without looking up. Amelia maintained her composure, each breath carefully measured. "Is that so?" she replied, her tone light, betraying none of the storm that cracked beneath the surface. Isabel, never one for subtlety, shot Sasha a glare that could cut granite. "Funny. I didn't realize side pieces got formal invites," she muttered under her breath. Sasha only smiled wider. "Oh honey, I'm just here to help him shine. Some of us know how to spotlight our men, not overshadow them with dirt and daffodils." The boutique fell silent. Even the sales attendant paused. Amelia stepped forward, her eyes locked on Sasha's. "Then you should know," she said softly, "that real women don't need spotlights, they bloom even in the dark." Without waiting for a reaction, Amelia turned, walked to the counter, and purchased the simple cream slip dress she'd admired earlier. She didn't need sequins to be seen. She didn't need to scream to be heard. That afternoon, as Amelia and Isabel walked out into the sun, Sasha's reflection lingered behind them in the boutique's mirrored door, her smile faltering. Amelia didn't say a word. But she didn't need to. In silence, she'd drawn her first line in the sand, and Sasha, whether she knew it or not, had just stepped over it. Gloria Brennan arrived unannounced on a Friday morning, carrying a bouquet of orchids and a heart full of intentions wrapped in sugar. Amelia had just finished pruning a row of star lilies in the garden studio when she heard the knock. The orchids should have been a warning. Gloria hated flowers. Claimed they were messy, seasonal distractions. But today, she brought them as a peace offering, though her tone immediately stripped the gesture of sincerity. "I thought I'd surprise my favorite daughter-in-law," she chirped, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Amelia kept her voice calm as she offered her a seat and a cup of chamomile tea. The last time they'd spoken was at the wedding, where Gloria whispered, "Don't get too comfortable, dear. Travis is used to high expectations." Since then, she'd only sent the occasional birthday text or forwarded Bible quote with no context. Amelia had long accepted that Gloria saw her as insufficient, too quiet, too grounded, too unremarkable for the golden son she raised. Still, she remained respectful, if only for peace. They sat in the garden studio, surrounded by climbing roses and the smell of fresh soil, yet Gloria's presence made the space feel cold. She smiled as she looked around, eyes scanning the space like an investor, not a guest. "You know," she began, swirling her tea without drinking it, "I've been following Travis's latest campaigns. His face is practically everywhere. Forbes, Business Today, those podcasts for young entrepreneurs. He's becoming the man I always knew he could be. Amelia nodded, listening, her hands gently smoothing a folded sketch. He's worked hard, she said simply. Gloria leaned forward, her voice dipping. Which is why I worry. He needs someone who understands his world. Someone who amplifies it. The implication hung thick in the air. This garden, while lovely, isn't exactly setting the business world on fire, is it? Gloria added with a thin smile. Maybe you should consider scaling back. Focus more on being present for him. Don't let ambition make you forget your real job. Amelia didn't flinch. She had mastered the art of letting venom sit undisturbed. And what exactly is that job, Gloria? She asked politely. Gloria's lips curled. Keeping him sharp. Keeping him elevated. Keeping him satisfied. After Gloria left, the air in the studio felt stale despite the open windows. Amelia sat on the garden bench her father had carved from reclaimed wood and stared into the herb patch. She didn't cry. She didn't vent. She simply replayed the conversation, dissecting every line like an architectural flaw in a foundation. Gloria wasn't just protective, she was territorial. She viewed Travis not as a son, but as a legacy. And Amelia? She was just the accessory Gloria believed hadn't earned her place. For months, Amelia had bitten her tongue, thinking perhaps Gloria's approval would come in time. But that day confirmed a truth she'd long suspected. No matter how gracefully she carried herself, she would never be enough in Gloria's eyes. Still, Amelia didn't plan to fight fire with fire. She was her mother's daughter. She knew patience could carve through granite better than rage. That afternoon, she called her father. They spoke about tomatoes and weather and a book Nathan was rereading, but as they talked, Amelia realized she didn't need Gloria's validation. What she needed was clarity. And something about that conversation, about Gloria's veiled insults, about Travis's silence regarding his mother's toxicity, planted a seed in her. It was still small, still forming. But it would grow. And when it did, it would uproot everything. The invitation arrived in a black matte envelope embossed with gold foil, extravagant, unnecessary, and unmistakably Travis. It was for the Urban Luminary Gala, an exclusive charity event hosted by UrbanSpire to honor visionary leaders in branding and tech innovation. Amelia received it one rainy afternoon while sketching beside the greenhouse. At first glance, she thought it was another one of Travis's press invites, the kind she usually ignored. But this time, her name was printed beside his in elegant cursive, Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, visionary couple honorees. She stared at the words in disbelief. She had not been consulted. Not about the gala. Not about being paraded as a prop in his corporate image. Minutes later, Travis called, not to ask for her input, but to inform her. It's great PR, he said casually over speakerphone as he prepped for an interview. You being there makes me look balanced, humble, grounded. People eat that up. Amelia's breath stilled. She was being curated, styled, displayed. Like a bonsai in a boardroom. It's for charity, he added quickly. You love causes, right? She said nothing for a moment, then replied, will Sasha be attending? The question sliced through his confidence. She's part of the influencer team, he replied, after a pause too long. But it's not like that, Amelia. Rather than argue, Amelia chose silence. That week, she threw herself into preparing her latest garden-to-gallery exhibition, titled Resilience in Bloom, where she showcased interactive installations blending plant life and memory, each display representing a personal loss and rebirth. The project was deeply emotional for her, but Travis didn't ask about it. Didn't attend the preview. Instead, he sent a text minutes before the show, don't forget to get something elegant for the gala. Black or navy works best for photos. It was then that Amelia understood fully, he didn't see her work. He saw her image. And in that moment, something within her quietly detached. She still smiled in public. She still designed her world with care. But beneath the surface, she began to observe him like one of her plants. She noted the way he changed tone depending on the audience, how his words bent to mirror whoever stood in front of him. She watched the way Sasha's name slipped into casual conversation more frequently now, each time under the pretense of business or branding. Sasha was in the gala planning committee, overseeing influencer coverage. Amelia was told to be civil. The message was loud and clear. She wasn't just being invited to support Travis. She was being summoned to play her part in a game she never agreed to. Amelia eventually agreed to attend, but on her own terms. She spent 2 days tailoring a floor-length silk gown the color of moss under moonlight, soft but striking, rooted in her essence. When the gala night arrived, the venue was a glass-domed museum adorned with LED pillars and digital billboards showcasing Travis's quotes in rotation. Inside, champagne flowed, cameras flashed, and Travis soaked in adoration like a man starved for spotlight. Amelia walked in quietly beside him, her presence commanding without being loud. The whispers followed. "Is that his wife? She's prettier in person. Didn't know she had style like that." But Amelia didn't flinch. She glided through the crowd with grace, exchanging polite nods but never lingering. Sasha made her entrance an hour later, wearing the same sapphire gown Amelia had seen her buy at the boutique. Their eyes met briefly. Sasha smirked. Amelia tilted her head slightly, then looked away as though Sasha were merely a breeze passing through. But behind the calm facade, Amelia began to connect dots. She noticed how Sasha's bracelet matched the one Travis claimed was a brand gift. How they shared glances when they thought no one was watching. She didn't confront him that night. Instead, she watched. She gathered. She waited. The garden had taught her that some things needed time, roots, evidence, intent. And when the time came, she wouldn't simply react. She would rebuild the battlefield entirely, and make sure every step he took would feel like sinking into soil too soft to hold him. The morning after the gala, the apartment was unusually quiet. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, but cautious, calculating, almost rehearsed. Travis had left early for a podcast recording in Bellevue, his cologne lingering behind like the ghost of intention. Amelia moved through the penthouse slowly, methodically, watering the potted bonsai he kept near the windows but never cared for. As she adjusted the blinds to let in soft light, her eyes landed on his laptop still open on the kitchen island, something Travis never forgot. He was obsessed with digital privacy, password-protected everything, Face ID, encrypted notes. But there it was. Still logged into Zoom. The last meeting had ended just minutes ago. She hesitated. Her stomach tensed, not from suspicion, but from that deep, unnamed instinct that blooms when truth is close enough to touch. Slowly, carefully, she clicked the recent meeting tab. A thumbnail popped up, muted, paused at the end screen. For a moment, she hovered, torn between the safety of not knowing and the dread of discovery. Then she clicked play. The video buffered for 3 seconds, then flickered to life. There, on screen, was Sasha. Lounging on a beige chaise, sipping something amber from a crystal tumbler. "You know," she laughed, tossing her hair back, "your wife may have been born with taste, but she dresses like a garden hose. You should thank me for pulling you out of the mulch." Travis laughed, genuinely. That laugh, the one Amelia used to think was reserved for her. He sat in a sharp navy blazer, tie undone, eyes half-lidded with arrogance. "She thinks she's building some floral empire," he said smugly, "but she's just a fancy gardener with a Pinterest obsession. No vision. No edge. I mean, Sasha, without me, she'd be lost, broken and wasted." Sasha cackled, leaned closer to the camera. "And when's the big discard happening? Or are we still pretending she's useful?" Travis smirked. "Soon. Once the sponsorship's clear and I get the investor deal signed. Can't risk her name being on anything by the time I make the jump. She doesn't know it yet, but her fairy tale ends before spring." Amelia stood frozen. Her breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a silent scream. Her body didn't move. Her soul cracked open, not from the betrayal, but from the calmness in his voice. He meant it. Every word. Amelia closed the laptop quietly, her hands shaking but her expression blank. No tears came. No rage boiled. What settled in her instead was colder. Clearer. A frightening stillness that only those betrayed past the point of reaction could understand. She walked to the mirror and stared at herself, not looking for signs of pain, but for evidence of the woman Sasha and Travis had underestimated. And what she saw staring back wasn't the same woman who'd once believed love could fix what power corrupted. That version of her had just been buried by truth. In the hours that followed, she didn't call Isabel. She didn't confront Travis. She didn't throw his things or scream in the shower or scroll through old texts to punish herself. No. She poured herself a glass of water, changed into her work clothes, and walked into the greenhouse. There, she began pruning again, snipping dead leaves, uprooting weak stems, resetting soil beds. But this time, with every snip, she whispered a plan. One seed at a time. One strategy at a time. If he believed she'd be broken, lost, and wasted without him, then he had no idea what it meant to be reborn from ruin. He thought he was playing chess. But Amelia? She was redesigning the whole board. The morning after the video call, Amelia was a different woman, but only she knew it. She moved through the penthouse like a shadow dressed in silk, quiet, elegant, unreadable. Travis returned from his podcast tour with the same smug grin and a bouquet of overpriced roses, claiming the florist had made a mistake by sending red instead of white. Amelia smiled, thanked him, and placed them in a vase near the trash can, where she knew they'd wither quickly. She listened to him ramble about audience traction and personal brand visibility, nodding with precision. But inside, every word he said built a blueprint for his downfall. She began tracking his schedule, not to cling, but to map. She started noticing patterns, connections between names he casually dropped and news headlines involving shaky startups and shady investors. She downloaded public shareholder information for UrbanSpire, studied Travis's recent endorsements, and quietly began photographing every document he left unattended. He still assumed she was the naive wife with a green thumb. He didn't realize she was memorizing his empire's cracks. That week, she met Isabel for lunch at their usual cafe tucked into the edge of Capitol Hill, where the walls were lined with vintage typewriters and second-hand books. Isabel, who had sensed something since the gala, watched Amelia closely. "You're too calm," she said between bites of spinach quiche. "You either committed murder or you're planning one." Amelia smiled faintly. "Neither. Yet." She reached into her bag and slid Isabel a flash drive. "I need you to go through this. Background checks. Sasha's prior engagements. Business filings. Anything off." Isabel raised a brow but took the drive without hesitation. "You finally ready to burn this to the ground?" Amelia's voice was steady. "Not burn. Reclaim." Quietly. As they sipped tea, Amelia began to share snippets, Sasha's fake charity claims, her past scandals conveniently buried, her growing involvement in Travis's public brand. Isabel, ever the investigator with a minor in journalism, leaned in. "Give me a week." That night, Amelia returned home and greeted Travis with a kiss. He didn't notice her checking his emails while he showered. He didn't notice her memorizing names from his call logs. But the ground beneath him had already begun to quake. 3 days later, Isabel called her with urgency in her voice. "You're going to want to sit down," she said. Sasha, it turned out, was more than just a social climber. She had 3 pending lawsuits from former clients claiming fraud in brand partnerships. 2 of her influencer deals had been quietly settled, and her so-called eco-collab with a fashion brand had been exposed in a niche design forum as greenwashing. More importantly, she had a sealed bankruptcy from 5 years ago under a different last name, Sasha Klein. But the biggest discovery? Sasha had legally changed her name after being sued by a former employer for leaking trade secrets. She wasn't just manipulative, she was dangerous. "And Travis knows," Isabel added. "He's tied to her and shell companies. If UrbanSpire's board finds out, it's not just a PR issue. It's criminal." Amelia felt the air still around her. The cracks were no longer theoretical. They were here, visible, expanding, dangerous. But instead of fear, she felt a surge of control. Now she had leverage. Not just for revenge, but for justice. Sasha had underestimated her. Travis had discarded her in advance. Now, Amelia would take everything back, quietly, piece by piece, until all they had left was the ruin they once wished on her. Amelia was deep in the garden studio when the call came in. Her phone buzzed beside a tray of lavender cuttings, the name flashing across the screen, Charles Keaton, a high-end real estate developer and one of her newest clients. She had just submitted 3 conceptual blueprints for his Seattle penthouse redesign, each rooted in sustainable materials and botanical integration, her signature style. But Charles didn't sound impressed. He sounded furious. "I just received a cease and desist letter from UrbanSpire," he barked. "They're claiming your design work uses proprietary visual elements from their campaign assets. They're threatening legal action." Amelia's blood ran cold. "That's impossible," she said quietly. "Those are my original sketches. Inspired by a 19th century greenhouse layout. They predate any campaign UrbanSpire has ever run." Charles exhaled. "I believe you, but their legal documentation is detailed. They have copies of your sketches registered under Travis Brennan's media group. With timestamps." Amelia stood frozen, her hand gripping the phone tighter. She hadn't sent Travis any of those files. But she had worked on some of them late at night, from the penthouse, on her personal laptop, which had sync access through their shared home network. That night, after Travis had gone to sleep, she powered on her old MacBook and combed through file histories and system logs. There it was. A remote access timestamp during the Aspen weekend. A download from her sketch archive folder. She traced the IP, his device. He had stolen her designs, rebranded them, and registered them under his media holdings to give Sasha's new influencer-led eco-luxury initiative a high-end architectural edge. But he hadn't stopped there. He'd backdated the digital files, inserted them into UrbanSpire's campaign deck, and packaged it as his visionary contribution. Her work. Her vision. Now weaponized against her. Amelia felt the full sting of betrayal, not just as a wife, but as a creator. This wasn't a man trying to move on. This was a man trying to erase her. Destroy her professionally, slowly, and quietly. She realized then, this wasn't just about ego or infidelity. Travis saw her as an obstacle to the image he was curating. She had become inconvenient. Too capable. Too brilliant. Too independent to control. So he stole her fire and tried to burn her with it. But Amelia didn't break. Instead, she documented everything: screenshots, timestamps, cloud logs, access trails. She uploaded them to 3 separate encrypted drives and passed one to Isabel, one to her lawyer friend in Portland, and the last into a safety deposit box she registered under her late mother's name. She also made an anonymous complaint to the board of UrbanSpire using a burner email, attaching just enough technical details to raise questions but not enough to link it back to her. Then, with the same silence that had always unnerved Travis, she made an appointment with a licensing attorney to reassert rights over her original sketches. And when Travis came home later that night, carrying takeout and talking loudly about a podcast interview with Sasha, Amelia smiled. She listened. She played the part. She even toasted his brilliant expansion strategy. But as she watched him eat, oblivious to the storm gathering around him, her mind was already 3 steps ahead. He had taken her trust and framed it like a trophy. Now, she would take his pride and frame it like a lesson, one he would never be able to erase, rebrand, or spin. The first real clue came in the form of a deleted voicemail that Travis had forgotten to permanently erase. Amelia wasn't snooping, she no longer had to. Their shared phone account was still linked to the home system, and when a strange number kept recurring in the call logs during his business trips, she simply followed the trail. What she found was more telling than she expected. It was Gloria. Her voice, calm and syrupy, laced with that same passive-aggressive tone she'd used on Amelia since the wedding. "Sasha, darling, you're doing wonderfully," Gloria purred. "Just keep being present." Amelia's too self-absorbed with her plants and sketches to notice what's shifting. "Travis listens to you. You're shaping him into the man he was always meant to be." There was a pause. Then Sasha replied, a soft chuckle following. "Let's just say by the time I'm done, the only thing Amelia will be growing is resentment." They both laughed. The kind of laughter that makes your skin crawl. Amelia stood frozen in the hallway, her hand trembling as she pressed pause. Her mind replayed every moment she'd seen Gloria at gatherings, subtly planting seeds of doubt. Every backhanded compliment. Every time Travis came home unusually agitated after a quick coffee with his mother. It had never been random. Amelia sat in her studio that evening, watching the light fade across the glass ceiling, turning the plants into shadows. She'd underestimated them. Gloria was not just a manipulative mother-in-law, she was the architect of the narrative that Amelia had never been good enough. From the moment she entered their lives, Gloria had been maneuvering her out, piece by piece, moment by moment. Travis wasn't just acting alone, he had a counsel. And Sasha was more than just a mistress, she was being mentored. Groomed into a replacement. That realization hurt far more than the affair itself. Because betrayal from a partner stings, but betrayal from someone who called you family cuts deeper. Amelia had offered Gloria nothing but respect, grace, and patience. And in return, the woman had plotted against her, whispered lies to her son, and now actively supported the woman who was dismantling her life. But Amelia wouldn't confront her, not yet. She knew Gloria's weakness, vanity. And she knew Sasha's exposure. They both thrived in secrecy, in illusion. And illusions shattered fastest when you let them think they were still winning. That weekend, Amelia attended Gloria's private luncheon uninvited, dressed in a sleek forest green dress and matching heels, not to impress, but to declare presence. Gloria's friends, old money women with pearls and carefully frozen smiles, looked surprised but intrigued. Sasha was there too, seated proudly beside Gloria like a guest of honor, wearing a champagne-colored jumpsuit that screamed "I belong now." When Amelia walked in, the room quieted. Gloria, caught off guard, forced a smile. "Amelia, darling. How lovely of you to stop by." Amelia smiled back, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I was in the neighborhood," she replied smoothly. "Thought I'd see what the future looks like." Sasha stiffened slightly. Amelia greeted each woman warmly, offering nothing but poise. She didn't mention the voicemail. Didn't mention the blueprint theft. Instead, she dropped subtle comments throughout the event, references to Sasha's lawsuits, her past scandals, all veiled in casual conversation, laced with insider detail only Sasha could catch. By the end of the lunch, Sasha's confident smile had begun to crack, and Gloria's proud posture had wilted beneath her facade. Amelia left gracefully, offering one final nod to Gloria. "It's good to see you surrounded by such integrity," she said sweetly. Then she walked out, heels clicking softly, the sound of a storm calmly brewing behind her. Neither Gloria nor Sasha realized they weren't playing chess anymore. They were dancing in a maze that Amelia had already designed. It was a Thursday evening when Amelia overheard the phone call that changed everything. Not in a dramatic, stormy confrontation, but in the kind of still, quiet devastation that peels the air from your lungs. Travis was home early for once, pacing their bedroom while speaking on speakerphone, believing Amelia had gone to her studio for the night. But she had returned, silently, through the garden entrance, her sketches left behind on the counter. She paused in the hallway as soon as she heard Sasha's voice laughing through the call. "She's still there?" Sasha giggled. "God, Travis. You're dragging this out longer than necessary." Amelia froze. She didn't breathe. She didn't blink. "It's almost done," Travis replied with that familiar silky arrogance. "I just need her to sign over the licensing rights to the rest of her projects. Once that's complete, I'll file for divorce. But it needs to look clean. Strategic. I've already informed the board that she's stepping away for mental clarity." Sasha snorted. "Mental clarity? Oh please, she'll be in therapy for years. She's too soft. Too naive. She'll crumble the moment she realizes what you've taken." Amelia remained in place, unmoving, unreadable. She pressed herself against the wall, her hand gripping the edge of the bookshelf as if it were the only thing anchoring her. Travis continued, his voice low now but no less cruel. "She's brilliant, sure. But she's emotionally fragile. Always has been. Her daddy issues, her garden dreams, it's all fantasy. Without me, she wouldn't know what to do with herself. She'd be lost, broken. Wasted." He laughed. That laugh, the same one she once thought was a melody reserved just for her. "I gave her a platform. I polished her. I made her presentable. And now? She's served her purpose. Sasha replied with a satisfied hum, the kind of sound that slithered through the phone like poison. Then finish it. And when you do, we'll host a proper launch. Just us. The real team. Amelia's vision blurred, but not from tears. From fury. Controlled. Frozen. Calculated. She backed away silently, returned to the studio, and closed the door. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She sat at her drafting table, staring at the blueprint for her next gallery show. Then, slowly, she began altering the design. Not of the exhibit, but of the war. That night marked the death of who Amelia used to be. The kind-hearted wife who gave second chances, who believed in love's ability to evolve, who thought kindness could tame ambition. That woman was buried under every cruel syllable she heard through that phone. In her place emerged a version of Amelia the world wasn't ready for. A woman not only unafraid of silence but one who knew how to weaponize it. She didn't confront Travis. She greeted him at dinner with a calm smile, served his favorite wine, and listened to him talk about his plans to scale new heights. She watched his hands move, his eyes flicker, his ego swell with every sentence. And all the while, her mind was sharpening. Travis had miscalculated. He believed the absence of noise meant the absence of fire. But what he failed to understand was that Amelia had never been fragile. She had been choosing peace. And now that peace had been shattered, there was no limit to what she would take back. Not with rage, but with precision. Vengeance would not be loud. It would be graceful, deliberate, and absolute. And by the time Travis realized he was sinking, he'd already be too far under to call her name. The morning after the phone call, Amelia woke up before sunrise, not out of habit but by choice. The weight of what she had heard hadn't crushed her, it had carved her into something new. She stood at her bedroom mirror for a long moment, studying the quiet fury in her own eyes. Her silence had always been mistaken for softness, her patience for permission. Not anymore. With her phone in hand, she sent 3 emails. The first was to Isabel, with the subject line, "Activate everything." The second was to her licensing attorney with updated design logs and legal documentation confirming the timelines of all her original blueprints. And the third was to her accountant, a private, highly discreet woman named Terry, who had helped Amelia set up a separate financial identity years ago after one too many red flags in Travis's spending. Amelia requested immediate asset separation, a freeze on any co-owned business withdrawals, and an emergency trust transfer into an account under her mother's maiden name. By noon, the emails had been received, and the response was swift. Amelia wasn't just preparing for departure. She was preparing for takeover. By Friday, she had cleared every personal document from their penthouse, birth certificates, contracts, original sketches, family photos, even the pressed flower journal her mother gave her. All of it, carefully packed and stored at her father's property across town. She made sure to do it while Travis was in LA filming a guest segment for a leadership docuseries. Amelia played her role flawlessly, even texting him encouraging messages, "Hope the shoot goes well." Excited to hear all about it. But in her studio, the walls were beginning to shift. She hired a small legal team, independent and aggressive. Through them, she began filing to reclaim her business under a new name, one that Travis didn't know, one she would relaunch once the dust settled. She also began writing a detailed exposé, not to publish immediately, but to preserve the truth in case the battle turned dirty. Every file she retrieved from his laptop, every leaked voice note, every time-stamped call and betrayal, she documented it all. And slowly, methodically, she transformed from the woman he thought he'd leave in ruin to the architect of his undoing. Travis didn't know it, but he hadn't married a gardener. He had married a strategist. Outside, the garden bloomed brighter than ever, lavender, hyacinths, calla lilies, each plant flourishing as if echoing Amelia's awakening. But inside her, it was winter. Calm. Still. Unforgiving. She changed her wardrobe, swapping earth tones for sleek blacks and deep emeralds. Her voice in meetings became firmer, her posture unshakable. Clients noticed. Investors noticed. Even Isabel said over coffee one afternoon, "You walk like you own a city now, not just a garden." And Amelia replied, "That's because I plan to." The transformation wasn't theatrical. It wasn't rage-filled. It was cold. elegant, focused. She no longer sought to survive. She intended to reclaim everything that was hers and more. Travis had plotted to erase her, but she would ensure her name was all that remained when his facade crumbled. She would dismantle the illusion brick by brick, with her hands steady and her heart unreadable. The old Amelia had loved deeply. But the new Amelia? She would conquer silently, and they would never see her coming until it was far too late. Amelia knew that war, real war, wasn't fought with swords or screaming matches. It was won in whispers, in signatures, in timing. By the second week of her transformation, she'd fully entered what Isabel called Operation Silence. Travis remained oblivious, consumed with branding deals, self-congratulatory interviews, and Sasha's constant chatter about a future lifestyle blog launch under Brennan and Whitmore Collective. Amelia let them dream. She let them believe she was fading. Meanwhile, she initiated a full audit of every company under their shared portfolio. With Terry's help, she discovered Travis had tried to move the Garden Studios licensing into a media branch under his name, claiming marital rights. What he didn't know was that Amelia had already converted her original business license into a separate entity 6 months prior, naming her late mother as the original shareholder. That move made her the sole legal proprietor of Whispering Earth Designs, which now owns 60% of the land rights surrounding Travis's future Brennan Collective headquarters. The garden you once laughed at? It sat on a goldmine of untapped real estate development zones. And she owned all of it. Quietly. The brilliance of Amelia's plan was in its subtlety. She didn't rush. She played long. For every lie Travis told to their mutual partners about her mental break, Amelia sent anonymous documents exposing Sasha's fraudulent collaborations to corporate sponsors, links with timestamps, legal references, influencer scandal receipts. Several brands began pulling out. She also used an encrypted server to send whistleblower-style emails to UrbanSpire's legal team, raising questions about document forgeries tied to Travis's rebranding campaigns. Her tone was professional, neutral, factual. Enough to trigger internal investigations without tipping her hand. The more Travis ignored her, the more he assumed she was breaking quietly in the background, grieving his betrayal in a sea of garden soil and abandoned sketches. But in reality, she was dismantling his foundation one chess piece at a time. Sasha, too, had begun to feel it. Her emails to Travis became increasingly paranoid. Why is the deal with Atelier Corp delayed? I heard my old sponsor drop me, again. Did you say something? Travis assured her, convinced it was unrelated. But the world around them was tightening, slowly, surgically. Amelia was no longer trying to protect her peace. She was positioning it for war. At the heart of her strategy was one move Travis never anticipated, turning his obsession with image into his greatest weakness. Amelia contacted Liam Dorsey, a quiet venture capitalist with an eye for sustainable businesses. They had met briefly at a design expo months earlier, and though nothing had materialized then, he had admired her proposal. This time, she reached out not with emotion, but with leverage, blueprints, real estate projections, licensing exclusives, and an offer to sell partial shares of her upcoming line, under a new brand name, free of any Brennan ties. Liam didn't ask for details. He reviewed her documents, asked only one question, do you want visibility or power? And when Amelia replied, power, he shook her hand and said, then let's build quietly. In less than 3 weeks, Liam funneled enough capital into Amelia's company to double her valuation. But Amelia didn't announce anything. She let Travis walk around town like a peacock, bragging about Sasha, about his legacy, completely unaware that every contract he built was now walking on glass. Amelia had thinned herself. The chessboard had been flipped. And when the final move came, it wouldn't be with a bang. It would be with a whisper, followed by the sound of everything Travis thought he controlled collapsing under the weight of a woman he believed too gentle to fight. It started with a press release. Subtle. Elegant. And nowhere near loud enough to be traced back to Amelia, at least not at first. Industry insiders received early copies of a campaign announcement from a new eco-luxury brand named Evelyn. The logo was minimalist and stunning, the tagline poetic, rooted in memory. Designed for rebirth. Whispers spread fast, about the design, the architecture, the innovation behind the spaces that blurred the line between nature and human intention. Travis's UrbanSpire partners began murmuring about the uncanny similarity to a project he'd previewed months ago. The materials, the layout, even the trellis design that he had claimed was Sasha's idea looked identical to the mock-ups in this new release. But now, the difference was glaring. This time, it was executed flawlessly. The blueprint was back, but this time, it bore the signature of the one who actually created it, Amelia Sinclair Dorsey, founder and principal designer of AGAlNST Studio. Dorsey, as in Liam Dorsey, Amelia had hyphenated the business identity, merging her brand with his capital. And suddenly, Travis was no longer the man who owned the future. He was the man who stole the past. The reaction came fast and brutal. Calls poured into Travis's office, not just from concerned investors, but from media outlets asking if he had plagiarized design concepts. His first instinct was denial. He accused Amelia of theft, claimed marital co-ownership of ideas. But his bluff collapsed within days. Amelia's legal team had anticipated every claim. They produced timestamps, original sketches from years before, client correspondences, receipts, even landscape photographs that proved Evelyn wasn't a copy, it was the prototype. Sasha tried to step in, suggesting they pivot their campaign, maybe even collaborate with Amelia to spin the narrative. But Travis lost it. At one press meeting, his frustration boiled over. He insulted a reporter who asked about his role in UrbanSpire's design scandal, and the clip went viral within hours. Sponsors dropped him. Contracts halted. One board member called him a liability. Sasha, now suddenly camera-shy, stopped attending meetings. Behind closed doors, Travis fumed, pacing like a king whose crown had cracked. What he didn't realize was that Amelia had done more than reclaim a blueprint. She had reclaimed her identity. Not with noise, but with undeniable evidence. She had taken the very thing he used to erase her and made it her monument. Amelia, meanwhile, didn't gloat. She didn't take to social media or grant interviews. She let the work speak. She let her silence stretch into something powerful. When asked by a journalist about the similarities between Evelyn and UrbanSpire's designs, she responded with one line: "Some flowers were never meant to be displayed, they were meant to bloom on their own terms." It became the quote of the season, printed across magazines and reposted by women's business forums around the country. Invitations poured in for talks, exhibitions, collaborations. Yet Amelia remained selective. She expanded her studio quietly, employing local artisans and giving young female architects their first opportunity in a space that valued originality over visibility. Her father, Nathan, visited the new studio one afternoon, and as he walked through the glass archway she'd once drawn on napkins as a child, he paused and smiled. "She would have loved this," he whispered. Amelia nodded, knowing he meant her mother. In that moment, she wasn't just avenging betrayal, she was fulfilling a legacy. Travis had believed she would be lost, broken, and wasted. But instead, she had become the woman he could never anticipate, the one who didn't just survive the fire, she learned how to build with it. Travis's downfall didn't come as a single blow, it unraveled like a sweater caught on a nail, thread by humiliating thread. After the release of Evelyn, the media tide shifted dramatically. The very publications that once hailed him as a visionary disruptor now began using phrases like credibility crisis and plagiarism scandal. UrbanSpire's board, initially hesitant, launched a full-scale internal audit after Amelia's anonymous whistleblower complaint was backed by hard evidence. Travis tried to play it cool, spinning PR statements about creative misunderstandings and shared inspiration within the marriage, but the narrative had already slipped out of his grip. His video interview with MorningWorks, intended to do damage control, only made things worse. When asked if Amelia was truly behind the designs, he smirked and said, "She's good at gardens. I handle strategy." The internet went feral. Within an hour, trending hashtags appeared: #AmeliaBuiltIt, #SilentArchitect, #BrennanBlocked. The comment sections filled with old photos of Amelia's early sketches, posted by former interns and friends who remembered her long before Travis had any vision. The final blow came from Sasha. Desperate to stay relevant, she faked a pregnancy announcement on social media, posting a photoshopped ultrasound and tagging Travis. The post went viral, but not in the way she expected. Journalists dug into it immediately, finding inconsistencies in her timeline and medical history. A wellness brand she was promoting dropped her within 24 hours. When Travis confronted her, demanding why she would do something so reckless, Sasha snapped. "You used me," she screamed. "I was supposed to be part of the empire. You promised we'd run it together." Their argument leaked. Someone from Travis's staff had recorded the fight and sent it anonymously to the press. In the video, Sasha accused him of manipulation, gaslighting, and theft. "She was your wife," Sasha spat, "and you threw her out like garbage for a fantasy." The public reaction was immediate and ruthless. Brand severed ties. Event organizers pulled his speaking gigs. And UrbanSpire's board called an emergency meeting. Travis, once the face of their expansion, was now their liability. Within days, they placed him on indefinite leave pending legal review. His phone stopped ringing. His inbox went cold. His world began to fold in on itself, slow, humiliating, and irrevocable. Meanwhile, Amelia watched from afar, never once stepping forward to take public credit for his fall. She didn't need to. The world had figured it out. The girl in the background, the garden designer, had not only survived the betrayal, she had built a better version of everything Travis tried to steal. While Sasha spiraled on social media and Travis's reputation sank under the weight of his own arrogance, Amelia remained composed, unreachable, and untouchable. She received an invitation to speak at the Global Women in Design Conference and turned it down, sending a handwritten note instead. "Thank you. My work will speak louder than my voice ever could." Her story wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about rebirth. One evening, as she sat in her studio with Isabel and Nathan, sipping red wine under the glow of the greenhouse lanterns, they toasted to closure. "Do you feel like it's over?" Isabel asked. Amelia smiled softly. "No," she said, "but it's beginning to make sense." Travis had underestimated her soul, her silence, and her strength. He had tried to destroy her quietly. But in the end, it was his own echo chamber that betrayed him. Amelia never raised her voice. She just removed herself from the narrative and let it collapse on its own. Gloria Brennan had always believed she could outlast any scandal. She carried herself like an untouchable matriarch, her pearls, her posture, her perfectly timed scoffs all part of a carefully curated identity. When Travis's public image began to implode, she refused to accept the consequences as real. "It's just noise," she told her bridge club. A smear campaign from a bitter ex-wife who never truly belonged. But as media coverage grew, and Travis's face disappeared from covers and stages he once dominated, Gloria's composure began to slip. Her phone calls to her society friends went unanswered. Her favorite designer boutique quietly withdrew her private shopping privileges. Even the board she chaired at the Seattle Historical Trust began reviewing leadership optics. Her social standing, built on decades of reputation, was crumbling by association. But what Gloria hadn't realized, what she was about to discover, was that Amelia had planned for her too. She was never collateral. She was a target. And the trap was already closing. Weeks earlier, Amelia had quietly enlisted the help of Isabel, who still had connections in editorial media. Together, they compiled a well-sourced exposé, not on Travis, but on Gloria. It outlined her involvement in silencing whistleblowers during Travis's early company launches, her backdoor deals with local political figures to reroute zoning rights in her favor, and, most damningly, her financial backing of Sasha's failed influencer fund disguised as a non-profit initiative. The article was published through a neutral byline in a respected journal, clean, clinical, and filled with undeniable facts. No slander. No emotion. Just truth, shining in broad daylight. Gloria read it in stunned silence, alone in her sitting room, the pages shaking in her hand. Her phone buzzed every minute with questions, cancellations, and demands for explanations. Her bridge club expelled her. The trust removed her. Even Sasha stopped answering her calls. She tried reaching Travis, but he was deep in his own spiral, furious, reclusive, and spiraling into depression. For the first time in decades, Gloria Brennan stood without armor. And when she looked at the battlefield she helped create, she realized Amelia had not just destroyed her son's legacy, she had obliterated hers as well. Amelia, for her part, didn't gloat. She didn't even speak Gloria's name. But she made her message clear in action. That week, she held a silent auction at her newly reopened L0ST studio, where guests marveled at an exhibit titled The Blooming Silence. At the center stood a single installation, an intricate iron sculpture of a rose emerging from broken glass. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Power built on cruelty is already cracking." The statement went viral across art and design circles. Attendees whispered its meaning. Industry professionals connected the dots. But Amelia never confirmed a thing. Gloria saw it. She knew. And for the first time, the woman who once spoke over everyone could only sit and watch, silenced not by force, but by irrelevance. Her name had become a cautionary tale whispered at elite gatherings: never underestimate the quiet ones. They bury you with elegance. Amelia had dismantled not just Travis's facade, but the toxic dynasty that propped him up. Not with vengeance, but with vision. And as Gloria stared at the glass walls of the studio, her reflection fractured and uninvited, she understood what Travis had never believed: the girl they dismissed didn't just survive them, she'd outgrown them entirely. Paige Westwood had always been a shadow in the story, a footnote in the chaos that followed Sasha like perfume and fire. As Sasha's closest confidant, Paige had witnessed the rise, and now the unraveling, of the twisted empire built on deception, seduction, and curated lies. She'd once believed in Sasha's dream of domination, of becoming the next mobile queen of influencer culture. But belief had turned bitter over time. Paige had funded Sasha's failed ventures, covered her scandals, scrubbed incriminating videos from the web, and even helped rewrite a fabricated origin story. Yet when Sasha's deals began to dry up, when brands turned away and Travis stopped answering late-night calls, Paige was discarded like a dried bouquet, no longer useful, no longer admired. Sasha accused her of disloyalty during a screaming match caught on surveillance at a downtown bistro. The video made its way online, and suddenly Paige wasn't just forgotten, she was publicly humiliated. But what Sasha didn't realize was that Paige knew everything. Every betrayal. Every secret. Every wire transfer and every lie told behind closed doors. And now, finally, she was ready to trade silence for power. Amelia received an encrypted message through her studio's business contact portal late one evening. The sender used an alias, Red Harvest. It simply read, "I have the receipts. I want immunity. I'm done protecting snakes." At first, she hesitated, it could have been a trap. But when Isabel cross-checked the email headers, it led straight to a known VPN page used when running Sasha's PR campaigns. Amelia agreed to meet, but not in public. They chose a secure co-working loft Amelia had access to through her design network, clean, quiet, no cameras. Paige arrived wearing sunglasses, her hair in a tight bun, and bitterness bleeding through her designer trench. "I don't want revenge," she said bluntly. "I want to be on the right side of history." What she brought was staggering: voice recordings of Sasha mocking brands she worked with, text threads of Travis confessing how he forged Amelia's contracts, and documents showing that Gloria funneled money through a shell trust to pay off a design magazine editor for favorable coverage. Paige had held back for years. But no more. "Sasha's a snake," she said, her voice shaking with exhaustion. "But Travis? He's the venom. And I'm done swallowing it." Amelia didn't make promises. She didn't coddle. She simply said, "Tell your story. We'll make sure it's heard the right way." With Isabel's help, they compiled a clean dossier, redacting names that weren't necessary but leaving enough truth to ignite an industry earthquake. Amelia contacted a respected investigative podcast known for exposing fraud in tech and business culture, anonymous sources protected, narrative controlled, truth prioritized. When the series launched 2 weeks later, it trended within 24 hours. Titled Pretty Faces, Poisoned Roots, it featured Paige's voice, distorted but undeniably authentic, unraveling the manipulative machine Travis and Sasha had built together. Listeners were riveted. Brands panicked. Urban Spire issued a public statement denying knowledge, but their stocks fell by double digits. Sasha tried to sue for defamation, but she had no case, her digital trail was too damning. Paige, once a silent enabler, became the unlikely whistleblower that tipped the balance permanently. And Amelia? She remained invisible to the public eye, her name never mentioned, her fingerprints nowhere on the fire. But she watched from the shadows as the world finally saw the truth. She hadn't just fought back. She'd orchestrated a reckoning. And now, the final move was all that remained. It all came to a head inside the tall glass towers of UrbanSpire's downtown headquarters. The boardroom, usually buzzing with confidence and curated smiles, felt like a courtroom awaiting judgment. Travis sat at the head of the table, dressed in a navy blue suit that no longer carried the authority it once did. His eyes, once filled with bravado, now flickered with unease. For days he'd been swatting at scandals like flies, lawsuits, terminated contracts, anonymous exposés, but this meeting was supposed to be his redemption pitch. He'd prepared a slideshow, a recovery roadmap, and even pre-written statements for press release. But what he didn't prepare for was the betrayal sitting just 2 seats down. Liam Dorsey. Calm, collected, and not just an investor anymore, but the new majority shareholder, thanks to a quiet transfer of shares from other frustrated investors. And beside Liam, in a tailored onyx dress, sat Amelia, her first time in this boardroom. Her presence was not announced. Her name not on the agenda. But when she slid a folder across the table marked intellectual property violations, proof of origin, the room stilled. She didn't look at Travis. She didn't have to. The checkmate had already been made. "What is this?" one of the board members asked, thumbing through the documents. It was all there, every stolen design, every forged timestamp, every manipulated contract. Backed by legal affidavits, digital forensics, and now Page's confession. One by one, the suits around the table exchanged nervous glances, whispering and scribbling notes. Travis reached for the folder with trembling hands, skimming through the pages that outlined his own calculated deception. "This is slander," he barked, voice cracking. "She's just bitter. This is revenge." But Amelia finally spoke, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "No. This is clarity. You didn't just steal from me, Travis. You tried to erase me. But you forgot, blueprints don't lie." Liam added calmly, "We've reviewed everything. UrbanSpire is at risk with you at the helm. Effective immediately, you're being removed as CEO." Travis stood, stunned. "You can't do this." The board chair replied, "We just did." And just like that, the man who once saw himself as invincible was rendered irrelevant, stripped of title, power, and control, all while the woman he tried to break sat still, unshaken, and unstoppable. After the meeting, Amelia didn't linger. She walked out of the tower with Liam beside her, the Seattle skyline glittering ahead like a new promise. "You sure you don't want to say anything to the press?" he asked, holding the elevator door. Amelia shook her head. "Let them wonder. It's louder that way." As they stepped into the car, her phone buzzed with messages from journalists, former clients, designers, and even distant relatives who had watched the headlines unfold. She ignored them all. In her heart, there was no need to scream triumph. The silence she held had carried her further than any rage could. Travis didn't chase after her. He didn't apologize. He didn't beg. Because he couldn't. There was nothing left of him she wanted. She had reclaimed her name, her work, her voice, and in doing so, she had reshaped the battlefield entirely. The victory wasn't loud or messy. It was refined. Architectural. A blueprint that started the day she stopped begging to be seen and began building a world where her existence could never be erased. And as the elevator doors closed behind her, Amelia exhaled, not out of relief, but out of readiness. A new chapter was coming. And this time, it would belong solely to her. The first morning of her new life began not with applause or headlines, but with birdsong and the soft rustle of wind through glass-paneled walls. Amelia stood barefoot inside the atrium of her newly completed flagship studio, a 3-story architectural haven built on the very land Travis once deemed a waste of prime development space. The building's heartbeat was natural light. Plants cascaded from steel beams, terraced gardens bloomed on each level, and every room carried the faint scent of lavender and eucalyptus. The name Evelyn graced the front archway, not just as a brand, but as a resurrection. Her mother's memory now lived in every seedling, every design, every silent triumph. Investors didn't just line up, they begged to collaborate. Schools sent students to tour her sustainable designs. Survivors wrote her letters thanking her for showing that quiet strength was not weakness, but strategy. Yet, despite it all, Amelia remained grounded. She didn't hunger for credit. She didn't thirst for validation. Her healing was the soil she walked on, the legacy she built, and the truth she never had to shout. One afternoon, she hosted a private opening for friends and family, just a few trusted faces. Isabel, loyal as ever, brought a vintage bottle of red and made a toast that had everyone in tears. To the one who bloomed in betrayal and made the whole damn garden jealous, she said. Nathan, her father, stood next. His voice cracked as he spoke. Your mother once told me you'd grow through fire. That's the only thing she got wrong. You didn't just grow, you remade the whole forest. Even Liam was there, not as a partner or suitor, but as a collaborator who had witnessed Amelia's strength up close and never once tried to own it. They stood together, overlooking a newly installed reflecting pool where koi swam beneath hanging vines. You still don't want to be the face of the movement, he teased gently. Amelia smiled. I'd rather be the architect. Faces fade. Foundations last. Around her, laughter echoed. Peace wrapped itself around her shoulders like sunlight. For the first time in years, Amelia felt not just content, but whole. No cracks. No shadows. No fragments of a broken woman trying to rebuild. She was the structure now. Far across town, Travis sat alone in a one-bedroom rental, the skyline now a view he couldn't afford. His name had faded from the news cycles, replaced by newer scandals and brighter faces. No one called him visionary anymore. Sasha had moved on, quietly fleeing to New York to rebrand herself. Gloria remained reclusive, her invitations rescinded by every circle that once adored her. And Paige? She flourished. Became a voice for exploited talent and co-founded a platform helping women protect their intellectual rights. The empire they once ruled had crumbled, not with violence, but with truth. Travis never reached out. Never apologized. Never returned. He simply faded, into silence, into consequence, into the forgotten archives of a lesson learned too late. Meanwhile, Amelia walked forward, never once looking back. She had not only survived betrayal. She had transformed it. Crafted it into her masterpiece. And as the evening sun dipped low and cast golden light across the stone path leading to her studio, she whispered to herself the three words once used to define her destruction: lost. Broken. Wasted. Then she smiled and replied aloud, with absolute calm, not anymore. The end.